Income mobility in the United States has been a hotly contested issue. A major contribution to this debate was the American Enterprise Institute study in collaboration with the Brookings Institute. Titled The Millennial Success Sequence, it has major implications for the current state of income mobility, education, and the American family. The success sequence consists of 3 steps: finishing high school, working full-time, and marrying before having children. Alternate substitutes to these steps include getting a GED or a college degree. When comparing different generations, a higher percentage of millennials have had a baby first before marriage and are childless than boomers. This is a worrying trend, as 50% of millennials who do marry first end up in the upper income strata, with 36% being in the middle income strata. Only a small proportion of 14% end up being poor. This is in stark contrast to millennials who have a baby first, leading to a 47% chance of this demographic to be in the lower income bracket. A somewhat brighter picture is painted for millennials who only obtained a high school degree but don't work full-time or had a baby before marriage, as 31% of this group ended up in poverty. Unfortunately, only 33% of all millennials have followed all steps, while 17% are on track. On track refers to millennials who have graduated from high school and are in work but haven't married or had kids yet. This means 53% of millennials haven't maximized their chances for success. What's interesting is that young men are more likely to be on track than young women by 7%, and Asians are the most likely racial group to be on track. In addition, 97% of millennials who follow all 3 steps of the success sequence are not poor by the time they are 28 years old, and the marriage step doesn't seem to be ineffective for millennials growing up in the bottom third of the income distribution, as 71% of this group who marry first are either in the upper or middle income distribution later in life. However, the marriage step differed by race. 87% of whites who married first end up in the middle or upper income distribution, while 76% of Black Americans and 81% of Hispanics who married first ended up in the same distribution. I will get to that later. Now, there has been skepticism on the effectiveness of marriage, with many stating education and work status are the real factors driving success. But when controlling for various background factors, marrying before having kids still doubles a person's chance of achieving middle or upper income status. This is because marriage isn't just a piece of paper, it is a contract that encourages couples to stay together long term, allowing them to combine their resources. This contractual agreement leads to family stability and encourages couples to be more financially stable before having children. Not to mention, the couple can use economies of scale, such as the cost of housing not changing, whether one or more people are living there. And as a side note, divorcees seem to be poorer than married millennials, as 19% of divorcees are poor, while only 7% of childless married couples and 14% of married millennials with children are poor. As always, different demographics vary in their ability to follow the success sequence. 26% of whites, 60% of blacks, 41% of Hispanics, and only 14% of Asians had children out of wedlock. And 47% of whites, 15% of blacks, 33% of Hispanics, and 27% of Asians married first. The rest are unmarried but delayed childbearing, at least for the time being. But what is most notable is that 59% of Asians are unmarried and childless, more than any other racial group. This can be attributed to cultural differences, which I will elaborate on at the end. Other non-racial demographic data points include lower income people having babies before marriage than upper income people by 30%, and young men are more likely to delay marriage than young women by 14%. And once again, I wish to emphasize the value of marriage regardless of education and work factors. White millennials are 1.5 times more likely to not be poor if they marry before childbirth, and it is almost 2 times more likely for black millennials in doing the exact same thing. But there are still racial disparities in those who married first, as stated before, and these racial disadvantages exist after certain control variables. But here's the surprising kicker. When 1 or 2 steps are missed, 64% of whites, 60% of Hispanics, and 43% of blacks end up in the upper or middle income distribution. But when all 3 steps are followed, 90% of whites and 84% of both blacks and Hispanics achieve upper or middle income status, a difference of only 6%. This suggests that the racial disparities mostly exist when not all steps are followed, but once all are followed, the racial disparities mostly disappear. and it is possible that any remaining gaps can be based on wealth. Now, looking outside of marriage, 49% of those who have at least a high school degree and 66% of those who don't have a high school degree but are in full-time work have achieved upper or middle income status. Overall, the success sequence has been extremely effective, where 94% of low-income individuals who follow all steps are not in poverty, and following all steps increases your chance of not being poor by a factor of 9 versus following no steps at all. We have already talked about the benefits of marriage, but there are obvious reasons that following the other steps are an advantage too. Education provides knowledge, skills, credentials, and social networks, and work provides basic household income and opportunities for promotions. The combination of these steps also builds up on and complement each other. These steps, of course, aren't necessarily causal. Those with better intellectual skills, better personality, and better physique, coming from better neighborhoods, better schools, and better parents, can better exploit these steps. Feel better? Ben Shapiro has actually referenced this report multiple times, and for the most part understands it.
The reality is, the single best way to escape poverty is the same for every single American. Get married. Don't have kids until you're married. Get a job. That's it. If you do those things, it doesn't matter what race you are, you will succeed in America. You will not live in permanent poverty in America, statistically speaking, according to the Brookings Institute.
However, Ben has forgotten to mention education, which is probably an honest mistake, but he implies the drive to follow these steps can easily occur through all cultures. To be fair, he sees culture as extremely important, but I see it as the dominant factor. The report itself doesn't argue for pulling your own bootstraps. Families with college-educated mothers are much more embarrassed by teenage pregnancies than families without one. Mormons encourage marrying before being pregnant, and Asian immigrants are more likely to incentivize their kids to excel at school. We need a culture that promotes excelling in work and school, and encourages marrying before having kids, maybe delaying sex until marriage, and maybe this culture should be influenced by a certain faith. Nevertheless, the report still understands the need for personal agency, and backs this up by how underprivileged groups can succeed by following these steps as mentioned before. The authors of the report have advised that policymakers should make society more conducive for people with less structural and cultural resources needed to follow these steps. Other proposed solutions include focusing more on work-based learning such as apprenticeships, wage subsidies that don't penalize marriage, and campaigns to discourage teenage pregnancies. I don't necessarily agree with all of this, but it is a change in the right direction. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give a like and comment, as it really helps my video in the YouTube algorithm. And if you like economics and political commentary, consider subscribing. Maybe follow me on my Twitter, and see you later.